Hello, Heather. I'm so glad you're joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So, would you take a minute and just introduce yourself to the audience? Let us know about you, what you do, and who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Heather Kasdan. I live in Cary, North Carolina, but work in Durham, North Carolina. This is my 8th school year teaching. I've taught students in kindergarten through 8th grade visual art, but this year I'm focusing on kindergarten through 4th grade. I have 3 young girls, 3 daughters, which is really makes life really fun and crazy. I'm trying to teach and be a mom.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I also received my arts integration certification from the Institute last year. Yeah.
Which, and you are one of the star pupils. I gotta tell you, like, I get to listen to all the coaches. That's my like behind the scenes thing, and everybody all the time was like, "Oh my gosh, Heather is so amazing! You have to meet Heather." So now I'm excited because I didn't get to
really
meet you. Yeah, no, and it's not like anybody gets a bad report, by the way. You know what I mean? But like the people who just stand out to us, who like get it. It just comes a little bit naturally, or they may struggle, but at the same time, they persevere and they really work hard towards it. Those are the people who really stand out. So you definitely stood out to our coaches. So I'm excited.
So yeah, I did the certification during the remote learning year, and so there was a lot of like, or no, that was actually last year. So never mind. That was it was going back. See, clearly I've lost time, but going back to school, it was like a really big transition. So yeah, I really appreciate that kind of.
Oh yeah. So let me ask you about, I want to talk about remote learning in general for you first, before we even talk about adding a certification on the mix to that. So when it came to remote learning, of course, I think this year is more, I'm not going to call it normal because nothing is normal anymore, right? This is maybe our new normal, right? Yes. So this year is better than maybe the last 2 years. How did remote learning maybe change how you teach now?
Yeah. So when we shut down in March, there was we were all under that impression that we were coming back in 2 weeks. And then it kept getting pushed back. And so to close out that school year, our remote learning was just asynchronous work on Google Classroom and having some live office hours. And that was really nice. I think it was a smart way to end out, at least in our art and enrichment classes. Especially because my 5-year-old was then just had turned 3, and my twins were 7 months old, and so it was there was a lot of diaper changes on Zoom, like with the M out of focus, with me talking to my students, and so, that was a lot. But the 2020-21 year, where we were fully remote that year, and I think that I approached it as art is just going to look very different, and that's okay. We did a lot more, we passed out a lot of materials, but I work at a Title I school. And also COVID had a lot of challenges to families. And so we couldn't expect students to have paint or even crayons. And so we would send things home quarterly, but a lot of things had to be done digitally. And I think what helped me, or it changed me, is I integrated a lot more writing, especially because that was a really big focus for our school during COVID, and then also just looking at the gap and like thinking about like literacy as we returned to in-person. So I focused more on writing and still continue to do so. And I think it also helped me look at art history, but not only in the historical form, but also like what's happening right now and what's really what are students interested in. And I think also because we were going through this remote learning together for the first time, the students that were my students during that year, we are very close. And I think it's just there's a bond between us because we were together in this weird way. And I was in their home, and like they were in my home, and I got to meet their cats. And so I think like it was just an interesting time that bond I don't think would come back. It won't be the same with my students moving forward, because I think we just were very vulnerable all together.
Yeah. Yeah. And as Brene Brown says, vulnerability can really tie people together in a unique way that's different than anything else. So in terms of this year, so you've had this, and I feel like this year is better, but it's so different because particularly I think fifth graders, eighth graders, and second graders, those particular grades for various reasons, but because like second graders have never had a full in-person experience until this year, right? And fifth graders, when they left, were babies. They were that transition year of third grade, which is so important, they didn't get. And so they're having it now. Which is interesting for fifth graders having that transition now. And the same for eighth graders, when they're coming into a school environment. So having that, plus having students who you've had this bond with now and having new ones. I mean, because you're working with kindergarten through fourth grade, right?
Yeah.
So having brand new babies who have no experience with this whatsoever. How do you feel like this year is playing out for you?
Well, I will say that this year is so much better. Last year was, I think, my hardest year in education, even harder than remote learning. And I think a lot of that has to do with there is a high expectation of like, okay, we're going back and it's going to be beautiful. I remember driving on the first day of school, really emotional and being like, we haven't been in this building and it's really special. And then it kind of just went downhill a little bit, only because we went back to like what we were before. And I think in education, I mean, we're all like, personally, we're all different now, like in some sort or fashion, but I think education is changing, and to go back without any change is really challenging. And so, our students and staff were not ready for a full day of school or, to then again, and we also wore masks. And so, and that was like brought different behavior challenges than we anticipated. Like students just being like, I'm not pulling it up. And then it's just like, what? This is not what we imagined at the beginning of the year. And so I think this year, it's just, okay, now everybody is back to kind of just being used to being back in person and what that means. And, but so, yeah, this year I would say that, my second, third, and fourth graders, I all taught during the remote learning year. And I think even for our second graders who are in kindergarten, they're still catching up. I mean, like, there's projects that we didn't get to do. Me and creating my curriculum, I am like piecing everything together because I was like, oh, you haven't ever done that before. You weren't in the art room in kindergarten. We actually need to change a project so you learn these skills in order to move forward. And so that's been challenging. Also, our current second graders and fourth graders didn't have art last year at the return. They had technology instead. And so that is also like another thing. So I'm still, I think for the next few years, piecing together my curriculum and kind of, which is really good though. I think it needs, we need to always reevaluate and reflect each year, but then also just knowing, okay, that's not going to work now that we are in this like post-COVID, like in a more tech integrated world. So I'm still navigating.
As we all are, right?
Yeah.
So other than writing, now you said that, well, first, let me back up.
Yeah.
You said that writing is something that when you leverage that during remote learning, that's something that has stuck and is something that you're continuing to use now. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about how you're using writing now, and then what other components may have stuck from remote learning that you're using now.
Yeah. So for literacy, I think so a big push on our specials team last year was vocabulary. And so really thinking about, I mean, actually my school does a really good job at saying like writing and literacy is not just for ELA teachers, it's for everybody. It's an infused and integrated everywhere. And students do groan a little bit when you're like, okay, we're writing something. And they're like, no, this is art. This is PE. What are you doing? But so I think essentially it begins with vocabulary and explicitly teaching vocabulary. I think that was a really big push. I did a lot of professional development with my team last year on that. and as well as our literacy coaches for the whole school. So thinking about like how we're giving contextual and background knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is I'm actually implementing, writing in terms of like thinking about artist statements or writing about their process in sequential order. And so a lot of that is collaboration with our literacy coach and as well as the classroom teachers to really think about, okay, like what kind of accommodations should I be giving for students? Or, our third graders, I just did a writing prompt where, they planned out, we made a color field artwork based on a memory of our emotions. And we looked at Mark Rothko and Annie Albers, which I love color. And so this is just me making art with them. But we planned out, we did like a worksheet that actually like, who are the characters, what is the plot, what is the problem solution, where's the setting? And then, picking colors from that. And then they painted their artwork. And then now they're telling me the story, which they've all done orally, but writing it is such a different beast.
It is.
And even basic sentence structure orally is really challenging. And so it becomes like more of like a one-on-one or small group at tables. And so then, but I did kind of just leave it open-ended, and I saw, there's, not only just like spelling or like lack of periods, but
right, grammar, right?
Grammar, but it is kind of just like, how do I can tell you the story in order, but writing it, it's like you forget. And actually it was really special. A student did this on his work, and now it's helping me form like my next third grade group. But he just did like the first, then next, last. And so having those basic sentence structures. And then when I did that, it actually like clicked for some students. And so I think, I'm clearly always learning from our students. But it is something that student and teachers appreciated us like really implementing that. And so then I would send the writing prompts to the teachers so that they could look at it and see like, oh, like I've seen some improvement, or like next time this might be helpful. And so we're doing a lot more writing as like right before break and now when we return. And really focusing on that with third and fourth grade, and then really focusing on vocabulary with K1 and 2.
So now this is interesting. So then my arts integration brain starts to click when we start to fire like these ideas. So I'm curious, have you done that project backwards, where you look at the art in terms of creating the composition?
Yeah.
Because and we often do this with an artist statement, right? But the idea, an explicit instruction of, oftentimes artists don't just put paint on a canvas. There's a rhyme and a reason to the process that they are composing, right? The art piece that they're working on. And so I'm curious if maybe this is an extension, or if it's something that you've thought about, if once you do it the first way, that we then flip it and then use that same composition of first, then this, and then the end, right? We use that same process to layer the paint, or to lay down a different process of maybe if you're working with clay next.
Yes, I like that idea. And I think like something that I am thinking about is like writings in like process, and how do we get there? And we are working with clay when we get back. So now there's ideas. And I think I've noticed that in first grade, I actually just like, because it's on my brain, I saw another teacher like, and students writing something about winter, but it was just like the first, then next, last. And so I think I'm just going to be utilizing that, not only in like instruction, but also it's like, so first we do this, then, okay, now tell me about it. And so, I think that it has a lot of, and then it's not so foreign when you're getting into writing. It's almost expected. Until students are able to be a little bit more critically thinking and able to be creative in their writing.
Yep. And I also think there's value in being almost overly explicit in the process. So like saying this was the writing process, it's the very same thing in the composition process because they are the same. We're just using a different tool this time around. And I think sometimes we miss that. Like we assume that they make that connection. Yeah. That students make that connection, but sometimes they don't. And I say that not just for students in school, but like, you know, with adults too. Like, we're teaching adults too. It's human nature.
Yeah. And actually this conversation is making me think, so I'm doing a similar project with fourth grade after our clay work. And so I always tell a story. I tell my story of when I was 6 years old and fell asleep on the school bus. And I am like overly detailed in like how I was feeling and like the colors of where I was, and just so that they can see like how I'm getting there. But yeah, using that like just having that language all the way throughout the process. That's really good. I'm going to go back to my lesson plans and script it a little bit.
I like that. I like that. I like being able to collaborate and kind of connect on just, and it's just something that naturally happens, of course, I think with teachers. So that springboards me to a little bit about how, now, first of all, why did you make a decision to go through certification during remote learning? Because that was a lot. I mean, that's a lot.
Well, originally I was actually going to sign up in 2019, but I found out I was pregnant with twins. And so I was like, that is not the time to do it. And so then, you know, the following year I was like, okay, my kids are still too small. Like, and at that time, I think, I can't remember if the application page process was before the shutdown or like during.
It was like right before and then crossed over. Like I think it ended March 15th. And then, you know,
so I think in that time I was like, okay, my twins are still really small. I have 3 small kids. There's something weird happening in the world and I don't know what it is. And so I waited and I signed up. Yeah, I signed up the following year. So I did it for the 2020-21 school year. Yep. And so I really felt, well, like during remote learning, I was like, okay, I really feel like I feel a need like in my process and for my students, but a need in my journey too, to really explore arts integration. And for me, I think like arts and social justice and arts integration is really important to my own practice. And so I took some courses with the Institute before. And so I kind of knew a little bit about arts integration. And so I was doing it to what I thought it was, and it was not. So it was very much like using strategies, but not yet fully arts integration. And so I really was I think I was ready. And I think like, I didn't know what the school year was going to bring either. But it really felt, and my school was really supportive of it, and wanted to support in that journey. Awesome. And yeah, I just really felt like it was the right time. And it's been something that I was looking at for a while.
Yeah. And I find that with a lot of people that because it's a big investment, but also not just money wise, but also time wise. I mean, it's a full year. And this year we're changing it up a bit in that people can go through independently if they want. And then if there's a sprint where they feel like, I really want a mentor here. Yeah. And I would highly recommend that for sprints 1 and 2. I don't know about you, but I would. And that way they can add those on if they want, or they can add on a coach for the entire process if they want. Yeah. But that I think gives people a little bit of flexibility with time and also with their budgets. But I think even that with all of that aside, it's an intensive program, right? There's so much information in it that we kind of pack into these robust video lessons that you get. And then to try to apply all of that, it's a lot. So your group, when you all graduated, I was so proud because not just because of the quality of work, which was super high, but also because you were doing that in the midst of everything with remote learning. So, like I said, I'm like a proud mama on all of you for that year. So I'm curious though about how, when you went through the program, how did that then manifest itself in your teaching? Have you seen some sort of shift in that?
Well, I first want to say, I think it's really important if you're going through the certification process to have a mentor. I emailed Evelyn so many random questions and ideas. And she told me by the end, she said that she would love being, talking to me on Zoom because I would just talk and then be like, oh yeah, that's what it is. I'm just like, figure it out through my questions.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just need someone to process with. I need someone to be like, yeah, that's the right direction.
Yeah.
And Tiffany is also like her mini courses or her mini, I think they were called
mini lessons. Yeah.
Mini lessons.
Yeah.
That was really helpful too. And so, yeah, I can't imagine going through it without some kind of mentor, even or just community to just be like, yeah, that's normal.
Yeah.
You're feeling, you're going the right way.
Yes.
But yeah, so how I can see it coming into now that I've done the program and now I'm teaching, I think I am approaching my curriculum in a very different way. And again, like not every lesson fits into an arts integration model. And so really also being intentional about where, how, when it's going in. And like at my school, I think it's changing next year, but our elementary students still don't have social studies and science. And that was a direct impact from COVID, where last year when we returned in person, it was, we just need to focus on ELA and math. And, you know, a lot of teachers tried to integrate social studies and science into their ELA lessons, which I think worked a little bit, but it's not the same. And so I really think about, those social study, like how to integrate social studies and science. It's not perfect, mainly because I'm also, you know, none of our elementary teachers teach it. And so I think that's really, that's challenging. I can work backwards with our middle school science coach or like middle school science teachers, but it is challenging when nobody's teaching it. And so then it's, you're also introducing the content and it becomes a little bit harder. But I can see that I'm much more intentional at what I'm teaching. And just like now, like with the painting lesson and writing, I really am collaborating more with teachers, and classroom teachers are also wanting to collaborate. And so I think it's opening a door and opening a process and curiosity of how to best reach and serve our students.
Yeah. And you just said the magic word. I think that, you know, as we're starting off a new year, we sometimes pick a word. And I think my word for this year is going to be curiosity. I think the more I study creativity, the creative process, the more I talk with other people, the more clear it's becoming that creativity is really all about curiosity and following that curious thread wherever it goes. So I'm glad that the teachers in your building and that you are both being able to follow that curious thread together, right? That's amazing. So before we close out, I always ask the same question and of everybody. If there was one thing that you would like people to know about creativity, what would it be?
Oh boy.
I know, it's a big one.
That I'm going to think about that question for a long time, I think. Can you repeat it for me so that I can really fully?
Yep. If there's one thing that you would like people to know about creativity, what would it be?
That I think that creativity has a lot of branches. Like if we think of it as a tree, it has a lot of branches, and that sometimes it comes naturally. Creativity, just like for some of us, it comes really instinctually, and we're immediately able to like not only just create, but also to problem solve creatively and really think about the world in a way. I think also creativity takes a lot of practice. I really think about myself in that, because since having children and teaching full time, it's really hard to have a personal art practice. And that's something that I really want. And so I think it just takes practice and intentional planning sometimes, even if it's just like for an hour. I'm committing to being creative. I don't know what that means, but I'm just going to be surrounded by something creative.
Yeah.
And I think too, again, like, I think I'm going to have the same word as you, like being curious and having that curiosity. Creativity takes a lot of process. It's not just about an end product, but it's really about the journey with it. So I think there's probably more branches, and I'm going to think about that. I'll have a better answer for you after we're done recording. But I really appreciate that question. I really liked it.
Yeah, no, and I love your metaphor and the idea that, some people can climb a tree and it's no big deal. And other people, you look at the tree for a really long time to figure out where your first step is, yes. Right? Yes. So I love that metaphor of the tree for creativity. So thank you for that. And thank you for being a part of our community. You add such value and joy and positive vibes to everything that you bring, Heather. So thank you so much for joining me today.